that's some of the things that have happened in recent times, that we have learned a lesson from that. I think that another thing that I believe this, I have heard, seen, read, and I'm sure so has everybody else, between social media and in print, expressions by people, some professional people, of such a nature as to create hatred. And in any modern society, I believe there is a need for incitement to hatred legislation that identifies such behaviour. It may be very simple. It may be very. It may be very bland in its beginnings. But generally, some people in the social media and in the print media come back to this subject by a different route. And what we need to realise is this: the person who receives this information, whether electronically or by way of print, they may be impressionable. There may be an impression created in their mind that this is the way to go. This is what needs to be done. This is the way you should treat people. So I believe that incitement to hatred legislation, to be really effective, we need to look at the area that I've just referred to. I think it can be beneficial. I think it can provide a situation whereby people do not say and do what they want when they want at the expense of all others, nor should it ever happen to be. Should it be that way? I think that the points I made already in relation, other speakers have made references to ethnic groups and minority groups. I think that the way we treat minorities, I think, tells us all about our own society. And we tend to be a little vague about some aspects of the way we treat others, those who are parts of minorities. And all I can say is this, that we as a nation, we as a people, we have gone all over the world. We have travelled everywhere, out of necessity, out of adventure, for whatever reason. We've travelled everywhere. And we have always been received everywhere. And there were occasions that we weren't received all that well. And we were the victims of discrimination. But that's all the more reason that we should make absolutely certain that we don't practice discrimination, ever, anywhere. We can't afford to. We can't afford to point at anybody, any minority group, anywhere. Because remember, we were those minorities, we were in that position ourselves, in different countries, all over the world. And we still are. And I would like to hope that we have earned the respect of the nations to which we have gone. I think, but we must continue to observe the highest standards and enforce the highest standards insofar as observation of human rights and entitlements are concerned. I just want to say one or two other things. It comes home to us all. It comes home to us all in different ways. What we should do and what we can do for society. I know at the present time in this House we're told on a daily basis that because of financial cutbacks and austerity, as it is called, that we're wreaking havoc on society and that we're doing this deliberately. No, we're not. Nobody in government, or I'm sure in opposition either, would do anything willingly of that nature. The sad situation was we arrived at the position we're in very, very largely by the failure of certain instruments outside our immediate control. Having looked back at it, some of us were here and pointed out certain things that were and were happening, and some that should have happened and didn't. And people scoffed at that and said, "What would that fool know? They're not really into it at all." Well, now we know. And the sad part of that now is this, that in the aftermath of all that, and there was no other way. I'm not one of these people who goes down the road saying, "No, we should have found a different way, an easier way, a better way." There's no such other way. We've been there before. This has been repeated many times before. But it is so sad to see children with special needs, to see older people in difficult circumstances, to see people looking for services, awaiting services. Remember, this is very like the 30s again, waiting for services that are taking so long to come. And it is so heartrending to have to look at the people concerned in these kind of circumstances and to be virtually able to do very little about it. I think, on the other hand, We often see things then and we complain about our ills and the fact that we don't have what we want. And I have to say, you know, very often, we're better off than we think. Very often, many in our society are far better off than we think we are. We can work ourselves into a tizzy, we can work ourselves into a total and absolute depression by bringing more of it upon ourselves. And for that, I say that simply because if we compare ourselves with other European countries, right across Europe, including some of the richest, we're not doing too bad. We haven't achieved the same efficiencies, and we haven't achieved the delivery that some appear to have done. But in terms of GDP per capita, we're not doing too bad. So that's one of the things that we need to recognise when we compare with others. And you know, we have seen in this country over the last couple of years people criticise some of our colleagues throughout Europe, allegedly on the basis that they have been punishing us. Well, we need to look at their own particular economies. They've punished themselves as well. And that's the sad fact of life. When economic implosion comes, it affects everybody. There's no doubt about that. It affects the poorest worst of all, but it affects everybody. And some people to such an extent that they sought the only way out that they could think of. A sad thing as well. I want to conclude on that. Discrimination again, and Deputy Staunton made reference to this as well. Lots of us have put down parliamentary questions relating to it as well. It's a subject matter that we follow from time to time. Why should it be that teenagers, for example, feel inadequate to deal with discrimination of whatever nature, bullying, and which seems to go on indefinitely, in a vicious and incisive way, to such an extent that the victims find they can only take one way out? That is a sad flaw in our society. That should not be happening at all. And that has nothing to do with wealth or lack of it. It has to do with a viciousness that is difficult to control when it takes off of its own accord, and which has happened in the past in other jurisdictions, and indeed in this jurisdiction, to represent the ugly side of an evolving society. I hope that we can combat those unfortunate trends in a way that is decisive and meaningful, without trampling on anybody's human rights.
Thank you very much, Deputy Durkan. I now invite Deputy Jerry Buttimer, and you have 20 minutes.
Gurmargat Cathaoirleach and Minister, I want to welcome the opportunity to speak today and to commend you for another reforming piece of legislation. Cathaoirleach, the Jesuit Centre for Faith and Justice, as the agency for the Irish Jesuit province, have a very interesting magazine, and I was struck in reading that during the last couple of days, a quote from Pope Francis in his evangelical letter Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel. And in many ways, what he says in that is a fitting beginning for what this bill is going to start with. And he speaks about the commodification of human beings, and he speaks about all of us being put into that kind of a commodity. But I want to just begin with a quote from that. Those excluded are no longer society's underside, or its fringes, or its disenfranchised. They are no longer even a part of it. They are excluded. Sorry, the excluded are not the exploited, but the outcast, the leftovers. And Cathaoirleach, we begin a second phase of this journey in this bill, following on from the pre-legislative scrutiny. And the creation of this new body is, from a human rights and equality perspective, one that we must all work for collaboratively in this House to see enshrined and to see passed and to see in operation. And we do that not as members of a political party or none, but as citizens operating under a constitution which supposedly espouses equality and respect for all of us. And as members of the House, we must promote and work to protect human rights at home and abroad. Minister, I want to commend you not just for this piece of legislation, but for your courage in standing up to tyranny abroad and to intolerance at home. Other countries, I believe, Cathaoirleach, must look at their role. They must consider how they are espousing human rights and how they are not fulfilling their international obligations. And I'm speaking, Cathaoirleach, not just in the area of equality, but primarily in that area. And let's cast our mind and look at what's happening in Uganda, in Russia, in other African countries, where the issues of equality, of lack of respect, of the lack of decency towards fellow human beings, of LGBT persuasion, or of women, or of those of different ethnicities or religions, is being espoused and is not being properly, or they're not being properly respected. And I'll come back to that. Indeed, you could make the point, Cathaoirleach, that the persecutions of Christians in certain parts of the world needs to be addressed and challenged. Because if that were to happen in this country, all of us who are Christian would not stand for it and would be unequivocal in our need to ensure that that is stopped. And intolerance of any nature cannot be condoned and cannot be allowed to go unchallenged. Respect must be lived by all of us and not just paid mere lip service to. The new IHREC will be profoundly important. It has been a long time in coming to today. It will be so important because as we develop and implement the rights of all of our citizens, and as we strive to reach full equality for those of us who are LGBT, and for all people, this Commission will play a very important role. I hope, Cathaoirleach, that through this new body, the public bodies will also pay due regard to their duties and obligations, and that they will, as Deputy Durkan mentioned, through their language, through their words, strive to ensure that what they do is about human rights, is about equality, and that the human rights and the equality in the pursuit of that can be seen visibly by how public bodies operate, by the language they use, and by the delivery of their services. I was struck by Deputy Collins's comment when I was sitting in the chair, Cathaoirleach, where he said this is a dollar and dime bill. And I couldn't interject, as you know, Cathaoirleach, because as the chair you can't do that in terms of heckling. Those who criticise this bill, you know, let's look at the composition of the board. Let's look at the calibre of some of the people on it. And I must profess I don't know all of the people on it, but the people that I do know, people like Savina McDonough, Mark Kelly, Kieran Rose, they're not puppets of a government or a minister. They're not going to do the bidding of the Department of Justice or whatever department it is, or whoever happens to give them dictation. These are strong-willed people. These are people who have shown by their words, by their actions, that they stand for human rights, that they stand for equality. And are we really saying that the people in the board, beyond the three I mentioned, because I know them, through their reputation, through their work, and personally in some cases, that they are not going to be independent, and that they're not motivated by a desire to champion human rights and to ensure the full implementation of equality in our country? Are we really saying that they're not going to do that? So, I really think that sometimes people oppose for the sake of oppose, just to grab a headline or two. And I hope that, you know, and the Minister in his closing remarks said that he was open to the bill being improved and to additions being made to the bill, and that's a positive. But let's not start from the premise that the bill is flawed. Because this is a Minister who's worked tirelessly to promote equality and human rights. And as a member of the Constitutional Convention, Cathaoirleach, I was a very proud member of that 100-member body. Not least because we have proposed many different measures of reform to government, one of being which is regarding the issue of civil marriage and equal marriage under our Constitution. And the Minister made reference to it in his speech. And I do hope that as we prepare for the referendum in 2015, that we will have a debate that is positive, that is constructive, that is respectful, that is mindful of all the citizens of our country, no matter what their sexual orientation is, that we deserve to have that debate in a manner that is reflective of the modern society we live in. And I do hope that we can have that. And I think the Minister is right to address in his remarks today his concern about the treatment of people who are gay or lesbian across many parts of the world. And I mentioned Africa, I mentioned Russia, but let's talk about North America, the supposed freedom of the free bastion of democracy in the world, the way gay people are treated in certain parts of the United States of America. Leaves in law that to be desired. And some of those politicians who profess to be Christian, who profess to be about equality and against discrimination, by their language, by their voting records, certainly doesn't enamour themselves to the issue of the full pursuit of equality and human rights for all of their citizens. And I would ask that government, at an EU level and at a worldwide level, with our partners in the European Union, but with our ambassadors across the world and with the United Nations, will raise the issue of the rights and freedoms of gay people that are being denied in many parts of the world today. And are we to stand idly by as a series of regressive laws across many parts of the world are allow for discrimination, allow for the suppression of human rights, allow for the denial of equality to be espoused and continued? Are we to stand idly by and say, oh, it's fine, it's another continent, it's a different culture, it's a different ethos? What are we to say to a generation of young people who are looking at us and who see in our minister as a model for bringing a new, respectful, tolerant country? What are we to say that we as a parliament or as a government, when we refuse to condemn and to move to change what's happening in Uganda or Russia, where gay people can be killed, can be imprisoned, even by guilty of association? I mean, Harvey Milk fought for freedom in the United States of America. There are many people across the continent of Africa who are this day fighting for equality. And in our country, we are now seeing the fruition of work being done to bring human rights and equality to the fore, and as the Minister rightly said, which is at the core and the heart of what we do as a government. And the Minister made reference to, I think in his speech, to 38 countries where to be gay is a criminal offence. Thankfully, in this country, in 1993, we changed that. And you are right, Minister. There is no room for racism and discrimination, no matter what we stand for and no matter what we believe in any part of the world we stand for. I have to commend the Minister again for his ceremony of initiation to being an Irish citizen. As somebody who happened to, by chance, one Sunday when after Fine Gael Ardèche, walk past the convention centre and to meet hundreds of people, new citizens and their families, full of joy, full of life, full of vitality, at being welcomed, at being made and given a welcome officially by their new homeland. It was wonderful. And just this week out canvassing, I happened to come across many different people from many different countries who wanted to vote, who wanted to participate in the local and European elections, and who knew who their candidates were, what they stood for, and were aware of the differences of parties and policies, and who said to me at the doors, you didn't push us away because we were from Poland or wherever. They said you stopped and you asked us for your vote. And that's the type of Ireland that we want to have, where our new citizens who come in can feel participatory, can feel welcome. But, Minister, I have a concern regarding the integration strategy in many of our cities and towns. Has it worked, or is it working? What is the view of the new Irish citizen, or even new immigrants coming into our country today? How do they feel about the Ireland they live in now? And indeed, what do the Irish people think of our new immigrants who come into our country. And I think it's important that as a country we do have a debate surrounding immigration and surrounding our new citizens, because we must have an integration strategy. And I want to, Cathaoirleach, in this House today, pay tribute to a group in Cork called Coistinne, which operates under the direction of Father Angelo Lafferty, an SMA priest in Cork, who does so much for integration, who makes new immigrants welcome, who joins up people from all nationalities, of all ethnicities, into a fantastic multi-faith cultural programme where we can all be embraced and feel welcome. And if we had Coistinne in many parts of our country, then I don't believe, Minister in Cathaoirleach, that racism and racist remarks would be what we hear today. And it does happen in our country, and we can't shy away from that. I want to join with Pádraig McLaughlin, Deputy McLaughlin, regarding the comments of the article in today's paper by Brenda Power. I think it's a wrong article in terms of the travelling community and what they represent and what they stand for. And it fails to understand the ethos and the culture of the travelling community. And yes, Cathaoirleach and Minister, there are some travellers who do transgress and who do break the law and who must be held to account. But you know what, Cathaoirleach? Just this week, I had in my office 2 young traveller women. They weren't violent, they weren't aggressive, they weren't poorly dressed, they didn't speak badly. They were like any woman that I know. They were concerned about their living conditions, they were concerned about their children's education, they were concerned about holding their family together, and they wanted to have a better life for themselves and their families. And what's wrong with that? Nothing. Nothing. And they were no different to any mother I know. And the article by Brenda Power sent the wrong message. And those of us who had the privilege of serving as, and I did, as chair of the Traveller Accommodation Committee at Cork City Council, recognise that in many cases traveller women who were empowered did so, empowered themselves for the betterment of their families, their children in particular. And that's why the language we use is so important. In conclusion, Cathaoirleach, in welcoming the publication of this bill to merge the Irish Human Rights Commission and the Equality Authority, I am very pleased that the first task of the IHREC will be to review Section 37 of the Employment Act, or should I say one of their first tasks. And as I stated recently in this House and also at other events, I think it's very much important that Section 37 of the Employment Act is changed, because it causes so much concern for LGBT teachers. And while this has never been tested in the courts, the exemption is a chill factor, at the very least, for many people, not just those of us who are gay and who worked in the classroom, but for those working in religiously owned or controlled workplaces. As a government, we've seen Minister Quinn and Minister Fitzgerald being very proactive in the area of bullying and in the area of discrimination. And our approach to bullying and discrimination must be consistent. We cannot accept legislative provisions which potentially facilitate discrimination based on sexual orientation, yet correctly ask those same teachers to prevent homophobic bullying. There is an inconsistency in this policy which I believe needs to be addressed, and I am confident and I am hopeful that this Minister will be the Minister to act on that. In conclusion, I welcome the opportunity to speak in this bill. I commend the Minister for his progressive approach. He will be judged as a reforming Minister, and in a generation to come, a multiplicity of people, a generation, will thank us for having Alan Shatter as a Minister for Justice and a government that puts human rights and equality at the core and the forefront of its policies. It would be wrong if we allow other countries to be regressive when we are so progressive. There is a twin challenge for us there, Cathaoirleach, which I know this government will address.
Thanks very much, Deputy Buttimer. I call now on Deputy Healy-Rae. And you have
thank you very much, Cathaoirleach.
Well, you have till the end of the
And at the outset, I'd like to thank sincerely the technical group for allowing me some of their speaking time to speak on the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission's bill. This is a very important bill coming before the House. I've listened all evening to the various contributions that have been made, and which were very thoughtful and very informative and very important to hear here this evening. With regard to Minister, a couple of issues. Of course, when we're dealing with human rights and equality, we have to look at the whole aspect of what is happening in our society today. And yes, our country has made great strides forward with regard to rights and equality, and rightly so. But there are a number of issues and difficulties that we have, and it's very good, Minister, that you are here this evening to hear this, because over a continuous period of time, and through your other role as a person of the legal profession, you will know that judges have on numerous occasions, including even the last couple of weeks, spoken out during cases where they have concerns that there are, in particularly younger type of people, going before the courts who have mental health issues and problems. And to be blunt about it, Minister and Cathaoirleach, they're going in the wrong place. And when we're talking about equality, when we're talking about protection of people's rights, I'm delighted that our country has made such strides forward in dealing with people who have mental health issues. Thanks be to God, gone are the days when people virtually had no treatment. I mean, you needn't go back too far. The treatment that people received was electric shock treatment. And that was surely an absolute degradation of people's human rights. But coming back to the issue of young people, in particular, going before the courts, who shouldn't be going before the courts because they should be taken care of in some other type of way, that's a matter that I would like to see you working in conjunction with the Minister for Health, and especially the Minister with special responsibility for mental health issues, working on. And I would rely on you in a very sincere way to look at that, because you had a case, I think it was even only about 2 weeks ago, where a judge demanded that the HSE come before his court a week forward from when he had a young person presented in front of him. And it was along the lines of the issue that I'm discussing. That was the reason why he wanted the HSE to come in and explain why this person was going before the courts at all. So that's a very important job of work to be undertaken, Minister, and I'd like to see you look at that. It's important. Earlier on, Deputy Durkan discussed the issue of bullying, and of course there is no place in society for bullying. And in particular of our young people, our young beautiful people who are attending schools, and this new thing that was never there before, of course, cyberbullying and bullying by means of mobile phones and all of that. That's a horrible situation for young people to have to put up with. It's an awful situation. We've seen some of the results of what happens and what is the outcome of persistent and continued bullying. And it shouldn't be tolerated in our society. And of course, I do know that our principals and our teachers do their level best to try and tackle this problem. But the horrible thing about it is it's such a hidden carry-on. Long ago, if there was bullying going on in the classroom or in the schoolyard, it was obvious, you could see it. But this is a hidden, sneaky way of getting at young people, and I was glad to hear Deputy Durkan speaking on it earlier on, and certainly again it is an issue that needs to be given a lot of thought, a lot of work and a lot of effort has to go into trying to solve that problem, because I wouldn't like for it to continue for the young people, the new young beautiful children who are starting off in school in September in all their innocence. I don't want them to grow up and go through the school system and be subjected to any type of bullying or any type of abuse of any type. Having gone through the Bill's Digest, Minister, a very important problem that we have in this country, which we shouldn't have because our country is so small, and that is the issue of the trafficking of people. I do know that since becoming Minister for Justice, you have at all times tried to tackle the gangs who, for all different types of purposes, traffic people into the country. But I really believe that every effort should be made to try and put an absolute stop to this practice, because there is no worse type of abuse of a human being than to traffic them and use them for some other persons or some criminal gangs for their ill-gotten gains. And I would support you in every way that you would try and fight that awful practice. Because again, what I mean by our country is so small and that we shouldn't have trafficking of people into the country, we should be able to control that. It's different for larger countries where they have massive borders and they're joined onto other they're tied onto other countries, and they find it difficult to police their borders and that. But we shouldn't have a situation where so much as one person should be trafficked into this country. And I would dearly love to see that awful practice stopped, because every person, whatever their nationality, whatever their religion or none, wherever they're from, they're entitled to be treated with nothing but the utmost of...
Excuse me, Deputy Healy-Rae. We've reached 7:30.
Oh, sorry.
So I would ask you to move the adjournment, please.
Yeah, I move the adjournment.
Thank you very much.
The next business is a private member's business, Wind Turbine Regulation Bill 2014, second stage, and I call on Deputy Michael Culreevy, Deputy Martin Ferris and Deputy Brian Stanley to move the second reading motion, namely that the bill be now read a second time. There's 40 minutes in this speaking slot. So, Deputy, who's the first? First is Deputy Stanley. Sorry, I have the names.
Thanks, last time, Corley.
You're taking 13 minutes, I think.
13 minutes. Thank you very much.
12 and 12.
And just in relation to the Wind Turbine Regulations Bill 2014 is what we're introducing here tonight. And all planning is to get a balance right, and we believe that that's what we've attempted to do here in this bill. Representatives, in particularly from the Midlands, will be aware that the proposal for the large industrial scale wind farms has generated massive debate and even huge opposition. The turbines are of a height and size never seen before in this country, and many people are frightened by the prospect of huge turbines being erected very close to their homes, and the impact that would also have on agriculture, the landscape, tourism and on people's lives in general. And that's why we need robust regulations, as we outline in the bill. And it's in this context that I'm introducing the bill on behalf of Sinn Féin here tonight. I would hope that it is supported to the next stage, where it can form the basis of much-needed legislation in this area. At present, all we have with regard to wind farms are guidelines, which are currently being updated. We don't believe that these are adequate, given the many concerns that surround the whole area of wind farms, and especially the massive wind farms that are planned in counties such as Laois, Offaly, Westmeath and South Kildare. The Government were supporting this development for export of electricity in the absence of an overall energy policy that would properly plan for the development of wind energy and other renewables. At present, the whole sector is being driven by private companies rather than a coherent long-term government strategy. So we need planning guidelines that are fit for purpose and are mandatory, rather than voluntary guidelines that we hope people buy into. With regard to setback distance, in the current guidelines, the recommendation is that turbines be placed no closer than 500 metres from the nearest dwelling. But that depends on the turbine, depends on the size of it. So one of the key proposals in our bill is we do it on a pro-rata basis, that there will be a minimum setback distance of 10 times the height of the turbine, which is reasonable and provides for that wind farms can be located in more suitable locations. Section 4 of the bill sets out that all proposed wind farms must comply and must be consistent with county development plans. And this is where our bill differs from previous bills brought forward. The Strategic Infrastructure Act of 2006, which was put to the Dáil here by a previous Fianna Fáil government, couldn't be used to override county development plans. Wind farms would have to be located in areas owned by local councillors, and I believe this is crucial to the whole planning aspect of wind farms, and it underlines the recent decision of the Department to overrule the decision of Westmeath County Council to enforce minimum setbacks. I referred earlier to the proposal to install massive wind farms in the Midlands, and it would appear now that this has been placed on hold, at least for the energy to export projects, although Minister Abbott was somewhat vague about this when he appeared before the Environment Committee last week as to the likelihood of the projects being revised. The basis for those projects was the Memorandum of Understanding between this state and Britain to export electricity. In the bill that we propose, no such contracts could be concluded before the state attains its own target in relation to energy generated from renewable sources. So there could be export. We'll meet our own renewable targets first. And that addresses a concern of the Irish Wind Energy Association and their submission in relation to our bill. While the export of electricity from wind and other renewables has a lot of potential for this country in the future, surely we ought to be reducing our own dependency on expensive imported fossil fuels before going down the road of exporting it. And there's the issue of fuel poverty as well, addressing that issue here. So far, we've seen no cost-benefit analysis. I've asked for this. I hear there's one. The Minister said that they've done some work on this, but I haven't seen any cost-benefit analysis in relation to the energy for export, the electricity for export projects generated from wind. And I'd like to see that, to see whether it is, see how the government stack it up, the viability of that. There's also a feeling, as I touched on, with regard to the export proposals, that the Midlands, counties like Laois, Offaly, Westmeath and Kildare, are being used for industrial-scale wind farms that wouldn't be and are not being tolerated in Britain. And that, in combination with the economic argument regarding the export of wind-generated electricity and the lack of robust regulations, has persuaded many people and whole communities to oppose the plan. And I suspect that has played no small part in the decision to put aside or postpone the proposal for that particular project for the time being. With another issue dealt from the bill is the consultation with local communities where it is proposed to site wind farms. Too often here in this state, consultation really means people being told what's going to happen when everything is in train, and not having any power to amend or prevent what's proposed. And that includes elected representatives. We've seen that in relation to the pylons, where the fact that a second round of consultations has been set up, in effect, it's an admission that the first consultation process was inadequate. Of course, suspicion is that the real reason for the issue of the pylons being put back and the long finger is till after the local and European elections are over, so that it may not impact on government party candidates. Many people are similarly suspicious in the Midlands in regard to the wind farm project that may be revived as well later in the year when the votes are counted, and the government might clarify that for us. The bill proposes in section 5 that specifications of all proposed wind farms be well advertised in the local media and accompanied by detailed maps showing the exact location where it is proposed to locate them. The project managers and those overseeing them would also be obliged to supply reports outlining aspects of the project and its potential impact on the community where the wind farms is proposed to be located, and to set out measures to mitigate against those effects. They would also have to organise a public meeting for those people living within the setback distances, where they would be allowed to come and voice their opinion and make written submissions and reports made on that. Other issues dealt with in the bill include noise and shadow flicker. There's some debate over the impact of this on people living in close proximity to turbines, and this needs to be properly teased out. What we're proposing in our bill is that shadow flicker wouldn't pass over any dwelling. We also propose that wind farm operators deposit a bond, a substantial bond, with local authorities, which is consistent with other developments, such as housing estates, in the event of damage being caused to local roads, bridges or other infrastructure. There needs to be strict regulations also with regard to the decommissioning, because these have a 20-year lifespan, and 20 years goes very quick, as we all know. So what we're saying here is that the operator at that particular time has to be responsible for the decommissioning. We believe that such regulations would go a long way to addressing the concerns of local communities and ensuring that wind farms are compatible with the interests and needs of local communities. It's about getting the balance right. So in conclusion, I would like to stress that neither myself or Sinn Féin are opposed to development of wind farms as part of replacing energy generated from expensive fossil fuels with renewable sources. We must do that. We must move to renewable sources of energy. There are, however, questions regarding the current economic aspects of the wind farms, and indeed the perception that all emphasis is being placed on wind to the detriment, Minister, of other renewable sources. The whole area of biomass, have we explored that enough? Hydro we seem to have moved away from, and none of those on their own, I know, will do it, and you know it. But we believe that a wider view needs to be taken. Solar needs to be looked at. There is a strong school of thought that the real dividend for this state and this country, due to our location, is from tidal and wave power. It will be some years, there is some more development and research to be done on that before that will be brought on. But we believe that we can become a global leader in using this technology with massive potential and economic benefits to supply our own needs and that of neighbouring countries like England, Scotland and Wales. So to finish, I'd like to ask all TDs to support our bill. It may not be perfect, people may find fault with it, but we would ask people to support the bill. It's an honest attempt at regulating what's coming. We know from the past, we know particularly from the housing boom in the noughties, we know what happened. The absence of proper regulations, the absence of proper zoning, the absence of proper guidelines shows that we basically made a bags of it as a state. We know the economic consequences. The planning consequences of it can be seen right throughout the state. Right throughout the state. You can see ghost estates in towns and villages right across the country. We can see the economic consequences of it. It's coming into our constituency offices. People left with huge debts for houses that are now only worth a fraction of what they paid for them. What we're saying here is that let's get the planning aspect of this right. Let's get the economic case for this right. But also, Minister, let's take a more broader view of meeting our alternative energy needs. Our energy needs are not going to be met from one source. The day of meeting it through just maybe coal or gas or oil mainly, those days are gone. In the future, what's going to be is there's going to be a whole tapestry of means of generating electricity, and particularly the renewable part of that. And we must increase that renewable part. And there will be no difference, very little difference, I'd say, between parties on this. That we have to do that for economic reasons, we have to do it for environmental reasons, and we have to do it to make sure that we have a sustainable economy and a sustainable society going forward. So I'm urging government TDs and TDs from other parties on this side of the House and independents to support this bill so as it can go forward and we have a proper debate. It's really a debate that we should have been having about 2 years ago. But what's happening is that we're following the development. The development is happening. The development is coming on top of us. Only for the fact that communities have stood up and said, hold on a second here, let's take another look at this. Only for the fact that people have protested. Only for the fact that the concerns have been raised right throughout the state. And for the fact that the British government have had second thoughts for their own reasons. And I'm not saying that I agree with those reasons. I don't agree with their particular reasons, why they have changed. But only for all those reasons, we wouldn't be getting this opportunity. And I'm appealing to you now, Minister, that we, as the Minister responsible for planning, that we have another look at all of this, that we go about this the right way, and that we don't make the same mistakes as we've made in the past.
Now with I now call Deputy Martin Ferris. Deputy, 12 minutes.
There's no need for any member of Sinn Féin to reiterate that this party and the broader Republican movement stands for ownership and control of our natural resources by the people of Ireland and for the people of Ireland. We support the use of renewable energy, and clearly wind energy has great potential for use here, in this small island, with the broad Atlantic stretching out from our western seaboard. It is a massive resource, and we should be making best use of it for the benefit of the Irish people. There are people all over the state struggling with their utility bills, and responsible governments should be trying to relieve that burden. It is a basic human right that people should be able to heat their own homes, have hot water, adequate light and basic energy needs without financial strain. This government seems to think that every aspect of human existence should be a source of profit for some private company. They have set about dismantling any vestige of a welfare state which existed, and I will go so far as to say any trace of humanity in dealing with vulnerable people. They're charging for water, they're charging for tolls on our roads, there's a tax on our homes, and you have septic tank charges and all other charges, and anything they can manage to privatise is going ahead at full speed. This is a combined to stale at a knockdown price of our natural resources. Minister Rabbitte signed an agreement with the British government to export wind energy produced in Ireland. This from a state which is so dependent of expensive fossil fuels. The agreement with the British is said to have collapsed. But I wonder if after the forthcoming elections we won't see it being resurrected. This venture, like many of other proposals and unfortunately implemented in some cases by this government, has unhappy consequences due to the lack of regulation and the lack of forethought. This whole area is badly in need of regulation, which is why Sinn Féin has introduced this bill. So far, there are unbridled activity by private energy companies looking to erect wind turbines around the country. The Midlands in particular was targeted for industrial turbines, which are bigger and more intrusive than what we are becoming used to seeing dotted all over our state. Not far from where you live, Minister, down in my own county, Ballyhorgan, Finuig, Lisna area, there are proposals and through the planning process at the moment to erect 10 turbines. The turbines 510 foot high. This is in a valley going back between the Kildove side of the mountain and the other side back towards Kerryhead. And that is being proposed to do. And what is ironic is that at public meetings that I attended, along with other elected representatives, some backbench TDs and councillors from your own party and from other parties, except Sinn Féin, have been saying exactly, have been agreeing with exactly what we are saying. So if democracy is to take its toll, you and your government and all their backbenchers should come in and support the Sinn Féin bill here tonight. These companies that we are talking about sent their representatives like carpetbaggers around the Midlands and other areas. Wads of cash in their pockets and contracts drawn up. In times of economic hardship, the lure of hard cash and the promise of more to come made many in rural communities prey to this kind of hard sell. Many now realise the full implications of the small print in their contracts they sign with companies, about which there is still very little known for the erection of turbines on this land. The way it has been done has also damaged the harmony of many communities, with families who have farmed side by side for generations now at loggerheads over the erections of turbines. This is often the way when new infrastructure is proposed and when new innovations come about, and sometimes people have to be disturbed in their homes and lands for the common good. But it is another story altogether when this is happening only to create profit for a private company and to provide renewable energy to neighbouring countries with which 1 watt of electricity stays at home. That's the sad part about it. If it was for our own people, you could say it's for the common good, but it's from export for private companies. It totally flies in the face of what is the common good. It turns out for some people that there are implications which they did not foresee for the use of the land and their ability to sell it on or to leave it to others unhindered by the contract. There are some who signed with one entity and now find that their interest has been sold on to others. The whole process has continued unhindered by proper responsible regulation by government. There are others who sign the contract and find themselves that they cannot even have to get permission from the company in order to apply on their own land for planning permission for their son or daughter, and can be refused. These companies are calling the shots and setting the agenda for the development of what should be a major state project, which should be designed for the benefit of the Irish people as a whole. The harnessing of our wind energy should not be another asset to be sold off to the highest bidder, so that the banks can be paid off and the ordinary citizen get no use from it at all. It goes without saying that any major development of industrial wind turbines should only take place after consultation with the local communities and with community agreement. It is not good enough that a company can throw in a sweetener in the form of some contribution to local facilities and expect the local people to accept the turbines when there is no proper legal binding obligation on the companies to look after them in the future. If these companies pull out, which inevitably will at some extent, who will be responsible for the decommissioning of the giant turbines? Will they be left rusting on our hillsides? An eyesore for the future generations to deal with, due to lack of foresight in this generation. In my own area of interest, agriculture, there are concerns too. There is no need to spell out the importance of agribusiness to this country and to our economy. There are many involved in livestock who are concerned, but specifically the horse breeders have expressed their misgivings about this willy-nilly development of wind farms. The thoroughbred industry in Ireland involves nearly 8,000 breeders and employs 14,000 people. We cannot take lightly that they have expressed concerns about turbines. They have called for a kind of regulation that this Sinn Féin bill sets out. Setback distances, not only from dwelling houses, but all from stable yards, must be established. They also call for a proper cost-benefit analysis for alternatives, including offshore wind farms, and of course this makes sense. There is also, as mentioned by my party colleague here, the opportunity to put proper investment into wave energy and tidal energy and solar energy. And to me, our turbines offshore, which some are. But that's the way we should be looking at it. We should be looking at it to minimise any disharmony it creates within communities, and to ensure, particularly, that the benefits will be for the people of Ireland and not for the private profiteers. We cannot plan our energy strategy in the best interests of the Irish people if we allow private energy companies to rush ahead with schemes over which the government has no control. With local planning regulations might be effective on a case-by-case basis. This is no way to deal with such a major national issue. Renewable energy is a necessity in this day and age, but it must not be regarded as a product, a consumable to be produced for profit only. We have to harness it for the benefit of people and, of course, meet our renewable energy targets. It should not be a priority to allow other countries to fulfil their renewable energy targets by imposing huge industrial wind farms on the people of the Midlands and indeed other parts of our country, when none of that energy to be generated will go into our own national grid. This area must be carefully regulated, and there must be an intelligent, sustainable energy strategy formulated which will be in our national interest now and for generations to come. In conclusion, Minister, I have listened with great interest over the years to policies put forward by your party and the previous parties that are part of your party now. Democratic Left, Sinn Féin, the Workers' Party, now the Labour Party. I've listened with great interest with what Pat Rabbitte had to say down through the years about the nationalisation of our energy and other aspects of our society for the greater good and for the common good. But it seems that once Minister Rabbitte got power, and indeed the parties that he belonged to down through the years got power, they have reneged on everything they have stood for in relation to using our national resources for the common good and for the greater good of the Irish people. I was part of a committee that we tried to produce a report here in relation to our national resources, offshore energy and so forth. And I dug out what Minister Rabbitte had to say at that time. And it was revolutionary stuff. It was brilliant stuff. He was talking about the future, about Ireland becoming self-sufficient and using the natural resources for the greater good and the common good of our people. But unfortunately, he has left all that behind him. The traits of power that he enjoys, along with his party colleagues, some of them that came the whole way from Sinn Féin, official Sinn Féin, right through to the Labour Party, all of them have lost their way.
No matter what.
Because they have been sucked in by the system, sucked in by policies of future governments that they argued against and vehemently argued against down through the years. Go back and check it. Go back and check it. Went all the way, they went back on everything they ever said. No different than what your party is doing now, all the promises you made pre the election. I'm sure Deputy Minister Rabbitte left the cat out of the bag and he said, well, we do say things, he said, prior to elections that we don't live up to. Okay. So I admire anybody with principle. I admire any respect are totally different to my policies of what I stand for. But once a person has a principle to stand by what they say they will do. And, you know, when I look back on it,
yeah, just
a member of your party that you quoted in here one day, from Limerick City, now deceased, he left government on principle. And you said he inspired you. Right? He left government, gave up a government position on principle. And that's the man, even though I disagree with his view on the national question, I agree that he had principle. I had principle. But your party, the very fact that you're standing by and supporting the privatisation of our energies in this country is an absolute disgrace.
Deputy Peadar Tubby.
Gur míle mágat alas ceann comhairle. Ardús Caimé Rá that I strongly support the development of green, sustainable, environmentally friendly energy. I support the development of onshore and offshore wind energy when it's done in partnership with communities. Climate change is a reality. It is and will continue to be one of the biggest challenges faced by Ireland and the international community in the coming decades. Climate change is causing thousands of deaths throughout the world. It's pushing millions of people into poverty and is forcing hundreds of thousands of people to migrate. It is the global threat. And it's affecting Ireland too, and will continue to do so unless there is radical change in energy utilisation patterns. It's easy to forget on a climate day such as today that only a few months ago this country was gripped by a number of once-in-a-100-year storms in the space of a few months. Climate change deniers are the flat earthers of this generation. The debate and the science has moved on. It's now time to focus on solutions. Fossil fuel must be rooted out of energy consumption. The true cost of fossil fuel on the environment is not factored into the price of oil and coal. The true cost of fossil fuel includes the damage that climate change does, and it's happening all over the world. And I believe that this government is reckless in its laggard efforts to reduce the use of fossil fuels. In Sinn Féin's recent jobs plan, we detailed a number of ways which you could kick-start the economy, create the jobs, and also reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. There's a number of important steps that can be taken, and the first one has got to do with energy conservation. Our plans indicated how you could get incentivise the private pension industry to invest €3 billion, also put up €2 billion from the National Pension Reserve Fund to create a green fund. Now, this, according to the IIEA, the retrofitting of 500,000 houses with regards to insulation would create energy savings of €748 million a year when the houses were complete. Over the period of 10 years, the consumers could pay their bills as normal, and the saving portion, the excess portion, would then be paid back to the Green Fund. And at the end of 10 years, energy bills could be reduced dramatically, homes would be warmer, and reliance on fossil fuels would reduce, as would CO2 emissions. We also discussed in our jobs plan the sequencing of investment in water infrastructure, beginning with counties leading the unaccounted for water tables, as provided by the local government services. Ireland currently spends €700 million, and that's not including capital investment, each year to produce drinking water. Yet, 43% of this is actually leaked out of the system. It takes massive energy to actually process this water in the first place, and yet the government stands over a system that leaks nearly half of it out of the system. We also indicated methods where you could reduce the lead-in time for the necessary offshore wind projects, and we would mandate the ESB to develop an extra 300 megawatts of offshore wind energy in 5 years. We also discussed the possibility of